There are certain connections that emerge with such spontaneity and depth that it's hard to believe they are merely accidental. Sometimes, when we meet someone, we're struck by a subtle yet unmistakable sense that this moment was meant to be, as if an invisible thread had been pulling us toward that encounter long before we even realized it. The environment, the timing, the atmosphere, all seem to conspire in quiet harmony, aligning themselves to make the meeting possible. It's as though the universe has been gently rearranging the pieces of the puzzle, waiting for just the right instant to bring two lives together. When the universe intends for two souls to find each other, signs begin to appear. They are not always dramatic or obvious, but they carry weight. A glance that lingers, a conversation that resonates far beyond its words, a chance encounter that feels anything but random. These moments, though subtle, are real. They whisper to us through coincidences, meaningful silences, and the eerie feeling that everything is happening exactly as it should. This video invites us to reflect deeply on those encounters that feel guided by something beyond logic or control. With inspiration drawn from the insights of Carl Jung, we dive into the mysterious ways the unconscious mind, archetypes, and the movements of the soul draw us toward people with whom we share a profound, sometimes inexplicable connection. If you've ever believed that some meetings are not just happenstance, but rather messages from the universe, you're not alone. For Jung, nothing we experience is entirely without meaning. The most powerful relationships, especially those that seem destined, are often rooted in unseen dynamics that stir within our unconscious. He proposed the idea of the collective unconscious, a shared psychic reservoir of symbols, memories, and patterns inherited by all of humanity. This reservoir influences the decisions we make, the paths we take, and the people we are drawn to. When we feel that a certain person is meant to be in our life, what we are sensing is not just emotion or instinct. It's the synchrony between our inner landscape and the external world. These profound connections often signal that we are entering the path of individuation, a journey of becoming whole, of integrating all aspects of ourselves, including those we've long ignored or denied. On this journey, we often project parts of ourselves onto others, what Jung called projection. In these significant relationships, we don't merely encounter the other person, we encounter pieces of ourselves reflected back at us. Sometimes, these reflections show us our brightest potential. Other times, they expose our deepest shadows, the parts we have hidden, rejected, or feared. Meeting someone who moves us deeply can stir intense feelings precisely because they activate these inner fragments. They may touch unhealed wounds, awaken long-dormant dreams, or challenge us in ways that force us to grow. Jung also spoke of the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine energies present within each of us. Often, when someone enters our life and it feels destined, it's because they awaken these buried aspects within us, offering a doorway to healing, balance, and transformation. In this way, destiny is not something imposed from the outside. It is a reflection of our soul's calling, echoed in the form of people, encounters, and signs. The universe does not act randomly. It moves in rhythm with the soul's evolution. When two people meet under unlikely or serendipitous circumstances, it's often a gentle nudge from the cosmos, a whisper saying, "Pay attention." And Jung named this phenomenon synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence that links events through meaning rather than direct cause. When applied to relationships, synchronicity becomes a powerful lens through which we understand that something greater may be at play, something that bypasses logic and speaks directly to the soul. Imagine thinking deeply about someone only to receive a message from them moments later. Or two people from opposite sides of the world meeting in a faraway place, as if the universe had woven their paths to intersect. For Jung, these are not flukes. They are the language of the collective unconscious speaking through reality, aligning the outer world with what lies within. Such events are invitations. They ask us to pause, to listen, to observe what is being revealed, not with our intellect, but with our intuition. In love and connection, synchronicity often appears at pivotal moments. The first encounter, a reconnection that defies time, or a series of events that lead two people back into each other's lives. These signs don't promise ease or perfection, but they signal that there is something meaningful to explore, something the soul wants to experience. Life brings to us the relationships we need, those that will help us heal, learn, or evolve. And often, they arrive cloaked in symbolism, in unexpected meetings that feel like answers to questions we never knew we were asking. Synchronicity is also a mirror to the inner world. When we are searching, consciously or not, the universe responds. But it doesn't speak in plain words. It speaks in symbols, a book that arrives at the perfect moment, a song that echoes our innermost emotions, or a fleeting conversation that carries the exact insight we needed. These are not accidents. They are messages. When the universe wants two people to come together, it begins weaving an invisible web of signs. But those signs require a certain sensitivity to be seen. They don't flash like neon lights. They emerge in quiet moments. A feeling of comfort in a stranger's presence, an effortless conversation, a recurring symbol that starts to feel too persistent to ignore. Sometimes the synchronicities pile up to such a degree that denial becomes harder than acceptance. Still, it's essential to remember that synchronicity does not override free will. It opens doors, but we are the ones who must choose whether or not to walk through them. Even if the signs point toward a meaningful connection, the relationship must still be built. With care, intention, and presence. Destiny may bring two people together, but it is awareness and commitment that allow them to walk the path side by side. For Jung, synchronicity was a principle that joined the inner and outer worlds, giving meaning to events that might otherwise seem senseless or random. To pay attention to these signs is not to indulge in fantasy, but to engage in a sacred kind of listening, a conversation with the mystery of existence itself. And when it comes to love, listening in this way can open us to a depth we never imagined. Because when our inner truth aligns with the flow of life, what once felt impossible becomes real. If the universe truly wants two souls to unite, it will orchestrate the meetings, the moments, the movements, precisely when they are needed. But it's up to us to recognize those signs and decide with courage and heart if we are ready to answer the call. In Jungian psychology, this intricate psychological mechanism is referred to as projection. Jung believed that we unconsciously project onto others aspects of ourselves that have not yet emerged into our conscious awareness, both our inner light and our hidden shadow. We project not only the parts we long to embrace, qualities we admire and idealize, but also those we instinctively avoid or repress. Within the realm of human relationships, projection often begins as something captivating, even magical. In the initial stages, it feels as though the other person perfectly embodies everything we've ever dreamed of encountering. Emotional sensitivity, strength of character, a sense of inner freedom, protective energy, and a mysterious depth that seems beyond understanding. However, as time goes by, cracks start to appear in that carefully constructed illusion. The reality of the person begins to diverge from the image we had unknowingly painted. This dissonance doesn't mean that the love we feel isn't authentic or meaningful. It simply reveals that the intensity of the connection was, in part, shaped by elements of our own psyche. The image we projected onto the other was not solely about them, but a reflection of what lies within us, our longings, our unmet needs, our ideals, and our fears. This dynamic frequently appears in those meetings that seem orchestrated by the universe itself, those fateful encounters that carry an inexplicable symbolic power. The emotional energy in such bonds is so potent that it becomes easy to mistake our internal creation, the person as we imagine them, for who they truly are. Jung once said that every projection is not merely a psychological error, but also an opportunity. It becomes a spotlight, illuminating parts of ourselves that still require attention, healing, and integration. In these profound relational mirrors, we begin to see not only our highest aspirations, but also our deepest fears, our unresolved insecurities, and the underdeveloped regions of our personality. When we cross paths with someone who stirs something deep within us, it's not unusual for intense emotions to be awakened. These feelings can be uplifting, euphoric even, but they may also be painful, confusing, and overwhelming. The reason for this is often that the person evokes old wounds, stirs unresolved conflicts, or activates dormant emotional memories. Love, especially the kind that feels like destiny, has the uncanny ability to reach into our past and tug on the threads of experiences we thought we had long since outgrown. In many cases, romantic relationships become sacred spaces of transformation. They become vessels through which we are invited, or sometimes forced, to confront what lies within. And for this transformation to unfold, we must be willing to look honestly at our projections. We must dare to ask ourselves, what is it about this person that captivates me so deeply? What is it that irritates or disturbs me? What emotions does this relationship awaken in me that are uncommon in my daily life or other interactions? These questions are powerful because they allow us to step back and witness the psychological dynamics at play. As our awareness deepens, we begin to see with more clarity. Not everything we experience in the other person actually originates from them. Much of it is sourced from within ourselves, our own unresolved emotions, desires, fears, and inner narratives. Emotions such as anger, jealousy, intense admiration, dependency, the fear of being abandoned, or the feeling of finally being complete. These are not simply reactions to the external relationship, but signals of internal processes still unfolding within. With that awareness, we gain something precious, the freedom to engage in relationships with greater authenticity. We begin to connect, not through masks or illusions, but through truth. Jung also introduced the concept of complexes, clusters of emotional energy that are formed through impactful life experiences, particularly in childhood. Many of our adult relationships unknowingly activate these complexes. For instance, we may feel drawn to someone who unconsciously reminds us of a parental figure, not because we are aware of it, but because that emotional imprint still lives in us. This is one of the reasons certain relational patterns repeat themselves, even when we make conscious efforts to break the cycle. Yet the point is not to try to eliminate projection. Projection is, in fact, a natural and inevitable part of human connection, especially in intimate relationships. The key lies in recognizing them and using them as instruments for self-knowledge and psychological evolution. When we develop the capacity to truly see another person as they are, without coloring their essence with our personal expectations, unhealed wounds, or unconscious fantasies, we create the conditions for a real relationship to emerge. One where two whole individuals can meet without demanding salvation or completion from one another. This, however, is no easy task. It demands courage, emotional maturity, and the willingness to face our own vulnerability. But the reward is profound: liberation. We no longer place on the other the burden of healing our wounds, filling our voids, or giving meaning to our lives. Instead, we assume responsibility for our own inner journey. Love then transforms from a desperate search for something we lack into a generous overflow of what we already are. So when the universe places someone on our path and we feel a pull, something beyond explanation, it's worth pausing and reflecting. What is this connection bringing to the surface? What in me is being touched, stirred, or revealed? Often, these encounters become luminous mirrors, exposing not only our beauty, but also our shadow, the very aspects of ourselves we've struggled to accept. And in that reflective light, we're offered a sacred opportunity, the chance to evolve, to heal, and to become more complete, both in the presence of the other and perhaps even more importantly, in solitude. When we speak of destined relationships, of those seemingly written in the stars, we often imagine scenarios drenched in romanticism, light, graceful, harmonious, almost enchanted. Yet the truth is more nuanced. The most profound and soul-altering relationships are rarely easy. They push us to our limits, challenge the stories we tell ourselves, and often drag into the light parts of our being we've long buried in the shadows. Jung called this unlit terrain the shadow, everything we deny, ignore, suppress, or simply fail to recognize in ourselves. But the shadow is not composed solely of negative traits, like anger, jealousy, or arrogance. It also contains our forgotten potential, the talents we never dared to explore, the desires we repressed, and the light we were too afraid to let shine. When someone appears in our life with great emotional intensity, so intense it feels like destiny itself had a hand in it, it is almost inevitable that this person will awaken our shadow. This can manifest in many ways: deep affection, conflict, fascination, fear. These destined relationships are not necessarily here to complete us in the romantic sense we often fantasize about. Instead, they are here to reveal us to ourselves. They function as spiritual mirrors, exposing what lies hidden beneath the surface of our consciousness. And because of that, the stronger the connection, the more powerful the emotional reactions it elicits. Feelings of inadequacy, fear of rejection, the need for control or validation, they tend to emerge in full force. The other becomes the theater where our internal battles play out, the conflict between who we are and who we have yet to discover within ourselves. It's a deeply uncomfortable process, but also an incredibly fertile one. The presence of the shadow in intimate relationships can be painful, yes, but it also contains immense potential for transformation. Jung once wrote that no one becomes enlightened by simply imagining figures of light. Enlightenment, he said, comes through the confrontation with one's own darkness by making the unconscious conscious. And romantic relationships, because they are so emotionally charged, are one of the most powerful arenas for that very transformation. When someone arrives in our life and stirs us so profoundly, that moment often acts as a catalyst. It awakens aspects of our being that were lying dormant, some of our most radiant qualities, yes, but also the parts we've long resisted facing. It's as if life, through this encounter, is calling us to look inward, to understand our emotional triggers, to observe the patterns we repeat, and ultimately to make peace with our shadow. Only by doing so can we become more whole, and as a result, more capable of truly loving from a place of wholeness. But let's be clear, this is not a justification for toxic or abusive dynamics. Recognizing the shadow doesn't mean tolerating harm or enduring suffering under the guise of spiritual growth. The discomfort that arises in healthy relationships is different. It is not meant to crush us, but to awaken us. It is the growing pain of becoming more conscious. In fact, the relationships that challenge us the most, those that shake our foundations, are often the ones that lead us to the deepest levels of self-understanding. There are couples who carry within them intense stories, narratives woven through deep encounters and moments when they almost gave up, moments when old wounds resurfaced, when unexpected reactions emerged and everything seemed fragile, as if love itself was on the verge of collapse. Yet it is precisely in these moments, when the shadow rises, that a quiet choice can change everything. Instead of blaming the other or fleeing from the relationship, we can ask with honesty, what is this trying to show me about myself? This simple shift in perspective, this turning inward instead of outward, can transform conflict into fertile ground for self-awareness and healing. Carl Jung taught us that integrating the shadow is essential to individuation, the journey of becoming who we truly are. And few things accelerate that journey more than a relationship that invites us to grow, to surrender, and to transform. That is why the encounters that feel destined are rarely the easiest. More often than not, they are the most real. To recognize the shadow does not mean to live in perpetual tension. It means to become more awake, more free. The more we acknowledge the hidden parts within, the less we rely on others to fill our voids or validate who we are. In that freedom, we create more mature connections, where love is no longer masked need, but a conscious and grounded choice. When someone enters our life and awakens both our light and our darkness, it is a sign that a profound call for transformation is stirring. It is an invitation to abandon the illusion of perfect love and step into real love, the kind that sees, reveals, and reshapes. For Jung, relationships were never merely about the union of two people. They were sacred paths for the evolution of the soul. The most meaningful bonds, those that feel mysteriously placed along our journey, often carry the greatest potential for growth. Being in a relationship, especially one marked by emotional intensity, is like walking with a mirror beside you. The other reflects back who you are, your light, your shadows, and the places within you that are still unfinished. Rather than expecting the other to resolve our inner emptiness, we are invited to turn inward and take responsibility for our healing. It's not an easy path, but it is a liberating one. Individuation calls us to embrace and integrate the opposites within: reason and emotion, strength and tenderness, movement and stillness, masculine and feminine. And it is within relationships that these dualities emerge with the greatest intensity. When we stand beside someone who both accepts and challenges us, who reflects us back and dares us to grow, we are given the rare opportunity to see ourselves more fully than we ever could alone. Jung also spoke of the anima and animus, the inner feminine in man and the inner masculine in woman. These archetypal images, shaped by personal, cultural, and unconscious experience, often become projected onto our partners, creating enchantment, confusion, or disillusionment. But when we realize these qualities live within us, we reclaim our inner wholeness and take a profound step toward individuation. Relationships, then, are not merely emotional experiences. They are symbolic journeys, rituals of transformation. Everything the other stirs in us, love, fear, the impulse to run, the longing to stay, are parts of ourselves rising to the surface. And the more aware we are of this, the more we can transform our connection into a path of self-discovery. That is why many so-called destined encounters provoke such deep change. They are not here simply to offer comfort or pleasure. They come to awaken the soul, to shake us out of complacency, to dissolve our defenses, to reopen old wounds, and help us rediscover forgotten strengths. On the path of individuation, the goal is not to eliminate conflict, but to learn from it. Each disagreement reveals an unhealed part of ourselves. Each tender gesture becomes an expression of our capacity to care, to commit, to love with maturity. Over time, what began as mere desire or enchantment can evolve into conscious presence. Integration happens when we stop expecting the other to complete us and instead see them as a companion on our journey, someone who walks beside us, but who also carries their own history, their own rhythm, their own destiny. At that point, love ceases to be fusion and becomes communion, two whole beings meeting without losing themselves. When the universe unites us with someone so deeply, it offers more than just a relationship. It offers a mirror for the soul. And in front of that mirror, we have a choice: to deny what we see or to accept the invitation to transform. This is the essence of the journey: to look within, to grow together, and to integrate what once was fragmented. It is this sacred process that turns love into a true path of individuation. So rather than endlessly chasing the idea of perfect love, we can begin to recognize the symbolic depth of each encounter. When a relationship becomes a bridge between who we are and who we are called to become, it ceases to be mere destiny. It becomes the soulful unfolding of something greater. Along this path, the universe continues to speak, through the other, through ourselves, and through every moment that can only be understood with an awakened heart and an open soul. Not every encounter is by chance. Some arrive gently, like a breeze. Others come like storms, shaking the very foundation of our being. But every meeting that leaves a mark on the soul carries a meaning beyond appearances. When the universe wants two people to come together, it moves through symbols, synchronicities, and challenges, all designed to awaken what still needs to be seen, healed, and integrated within us. Jung's psychology reminds us that true love is not built only on compatibility, but on reflection. Love reveals who we are, where our shadows lie, and how much more we can become. Every bond, then, is an invitation to grow, to awaken, to become whole. If you've ever felt that certain encounters were guided by something greater, don't dismiss that feeling. Perhaps it's time to look deeper into these connections, to find not just affection, but meaning within them. And if this message resonates with something in you, subscribe, stay on this path, and continue your journey with the next video. Transformation begins with a single step. And maybe, just maybe, that step is right here, right now.